hope that you're happy with what you pulled here. And I mean, there's always more if you need some orphans out of the orphanage, or if you do want to, if you want to take that opportunity to go for a blind adoption. I will be bringing some more Dragon Heist home tomorrow. Daily, you are a very chipper person. You know, your knowledge and your positivity are very highly valued, and I appreciate that very much. Because look, for all of you, you know, Daily certainly. I mean, if I had like titled patron of the arts, if what I do is considered art in some way, you know, Daily certainly you've stepped up and you've supported the channel through subscriptions, you know, gifted or personal, and you have also been picking up some minis, and I do try and go out of my way for all of you, you know, whether you know subscriber or not, or if you got minis, if you ended up sponsoring any minis. Over time, I do try and learn about you and understand who you are, the things that you like. You know, where are your strengths as far as, you know, if I need help with something, if I need a reference, if I need someone with a particular expertise, you know, I do try and pay attention to the things that you say, because maybe I can tap your talents, you know, for advice, or even if I need a commission of some kind, because I need some kind of help from someone who's better at art, or maybe someone, you know, someone out there, because I'm going to be going through this process of, you know, redoing the display and all this. If one of you out there, you know, if graphic design in that capacity or something along those lines is a strong point for you, I might be able to, you know, as friends, or if you know, or as a business proposition, I might be able to do business with you, or speak as friends and, you know, say, hey, I'll tell you what, I'll happily promote your skills on the channel for helping set something up, or with other things that just happen in life, you know, even beyond role-playing or D&D. So, you know, as you all talk and you joke and you just share things, I do really try and pay attention to who you are and what you do, because I appreciate you all. I mean, I'm treating you as I would treat you if you came into my physical store, right? Over time, I'll learn your name or your nickname that you earn in the store, you know, your hobbies, the things you like. You know, if you're in a relationship or you have pets or kids or whatever, you know, and to ask about them and to keep tabs on, you know, what's going on. Or, you know, for some of the guys or girls that come in, if they're looking for a job or whatnot, I do keep my eye on job boards, and there's other resources through private or public entities that might be able to help out if someone's in need. So, I get what you're saying, Azrael. And D&M's, thank you for, as I was on my soapbox there, thank you for for being the enforcer. What you got to watch out, Azrael. D&M's is swinging that billy club. Oh, and speaking of D&M's here, you said you posted some pictures on Discord here. What did you post? Unfortunately, I don't see a topic lit up. In your world? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you meant just, I saw these. I was looking for like a fresh, like you just posted something right as we were talking. Oh, yeah. Yep. Yeah, you've definitely got a lot more than we have here in Ohio so far, at least in my neck of the woods. We got a little bit of a dusting. It's only really just recently started to get cold. I mean, heck, earlier this week it was maybe tickling 50 degrees. Shovel twice before work, twice at work, and use the snowblower today. Yep. The Ravnica dice, I have one on the shelf, but it's sealed because it's it's something that's available for you all here. I'll see if I can find a good picture to put on display here. All right, so here you go. Um, they are silver, like a swirly silver or like a steel, with blue numbers, and I mean you get a tin that kind of matches, and then you do get this large D10, and each of the faces has a guild symbol, and so if you needed to randomly generate content that involves one of the guilds, you would theoretically have an even chance of rolling one of the 10 guilds of Ravnica. They do come in this tin. You do get a full set, right? You get the 4d6 in there. So if you do want to roll for, your stats, you can do so with all the same dice. And of course, look, you need a good handful of d6s for sneak attack, fireballs, things like that. And then the guild symbol die is just sort of like a nice little touch. Yeah, the water deep ones with the hit point tracker. And hey, yeah, as Azrael said, if you come up with, I guess, some sort of a consistent translation for it, you can use that clan die for, I guess, a damage die of some kind, too. Okay, Rhodey. I don't know if they're out of print. I have one on my shelf here, but I may still have some at the store. In the worst case, I'll just go and don't tell the owner, but I'll take one off the shelf. Daily, well, hey, I understand that, Daily. And I think you'll get a lot of use out of polymorph, Coffee Cat. Oh, you mean throwing it at unruly players? Well, it is a little chunkier thing of plastic. If you hit them really good, then you'll brand them with one of the guilds. Pardon me. Oh, soda. Sorry. All right. Well, let me get this. There we go. My final 2 boxes of Monster Menagerie on display. We'll see if we can find them home sometime. And let's start our talk about dungeons. Technotron had a great idea the other day, throwing a koosh ball at unruly players. Hey, Technotron, speaking of cracking open boxes, Technotron cracked open a box today of Ravnica and created a good, solid, an adventure idea out of it. And his box was really interesting. He had 3 flyers in it. He had the Rock, the Windrake, and the Arclight Phoenix. And inside was Krenko, the little goblin. And the basic premise was a goblin was running sort of like a Fast and Furious, like illegal street race, except it wasn't in the street, it was through the skies of Ravnica. And so the players would choose their mount, and the adventure would be sort of this flying illegal race through the skies of Ravnica as in a contest. And then the winner could keep their mount, or which was a stolen mount, but still, or get a magic item or a weapon of some kind. Yeah, it was. I love his creativity. Technotron's an awesome dude, and he has a really unique mind. And I don't mean that as a backhanded, like, oh, bless his heart kind of a thing, right? I mean, he's a really solid guy to watch, and to really come up with some good content. Now, what we're going to be planning isn't necessarily going to be on the fly. I mean, it can be. And look, we're talking dungeons. A dungeon can be a lot of things. A dungeon can be a dark underground place, you know, full of mold and orcs and skeletons or whatever. Am I Southern? Well, I was not born in Ohio. Um, well, you could say that I was born in Southern Ohio, that being Florida. Hey, it is a new Monica. How now, brown cow? Yvonne's giving the brown chicken brown cow. By the way, Yvonne's been streaming recently too. Yvonne, I hope you were streaming Magic the Gathering, and I hope that you're having some fun with it. Hey, I'm sporting Jace. I'm hip. I'm with it. I'm cool. Whoa. Yeah, well, it's cultural, Azrael. I mean, that's also why I say soda, and people up here in Ohio call it pop, but I call it soda because it's soda. At least where I was, where I done did grewed up. I done did gone and went growed up. You figure out what tense that is. So, as I was saying, a dungeon can be a very classic dungeon, you know, underground. It is a dungeon. It's literally a prison underneath a keep or a palace of some kind. A dungeon can be, well, let's see, we made a casino into a dungeon, right? It's still a closed off area of, you know, certain circumstances occurring. You know, it's not necessarily easy to leave once you're inside. There are threats inside this contained environment. So we've had kind of a casino heist. In fact, we've kind of had two. We had the Devil's Luck Casino, which was kind of a haunted, or it was a Devil's Deal, I think it was Devil's Deal Casino, something like that. And we've also had a riverboat. And each of them were confined in their own way, one by supernatural circumstances, and the other because, I mean, you could leave, you could jump off the boat, you know, in the middle of the river, but it was kind of like an old, like, Mississippi paddle wheel casino. You know, you could jump in the water and leave, but I don't know, crocodile might eat you, or, you know, you'd be losing information on the big bad evil guy, so you ought not leave, even though you had the ability to leave. And we've made an outdoor dungeon. It was located in a canyon. It's so like a valley and canyon, and so there was nothing, you know, dark and dank about it. It wasn't, you know, infested with mold and rats. There was areas to hide. There was guard towers to avoid or confront. There were patrols that went back and forth, and so it was a dungeon in that broad sense of it's a contained environment. But it was a rather large outdoor one where you had to go and steal supplies, and try and undermine this occupying military force. Azrael, malls are totally dungeons. I could see that. And of course, you know, ever more we're seeing, you know, what's a shopping mall? What? Oh, it's one of those big empty buildings, isn't it? You know, I mean, no offense to any of you who you know, who work in one or own one, or, you know, because I don't want to see your jobs threatened, but it's interesting to see just how quickly the culture can shift. Where we went from, you know, kind of quaint downtown shopping, or, you know, all of these department stores, you know, they had their own stores, and then everything kind of consolidated with the rise of the shopping mall. And that was 40, 50 years ago when that started happening. And so now a lot of these buildings, that have been around for that long, or even a shorter amount of time. They might have been built during the economic boom in the 80s, kind of refined in the 90s, and now they've, coasting along. But now we've seen a great shift in society, and, it can be a little shocking going to your local mall and, like 1 out of 3, 1 out of 4 of the storefronts are closed up because it's irrelevant to the business model. And even big, look at Sears, look at Macy's, look at Elder Beerman. These are even just local examples to my local mall. You want to come up and say hi to people? You're just gonna bite my elbow. Hey, come here. Come on. There he is. So, all right. So yeah, malls, I guess, can be dungeons in their own way as well. Hopefully not with roaming bands of skeletons or orcs, but instead a pleasant shopping experience where you can find the things you're looking for. Now, what I want to invoke then, because dungeons can be a lot of different things, and ultimately as a DM, look, a dungeon is going to help you advance your story. A dungeon should be relevant to what's going on. And many times, a dungeon is a break away from broad narration of world circumstances, longer timetables, or actions that are just, I'm not under duress. I'm just going to do this for the day. To suddenly, we are now in a tactical micromanagement approach, in many cases, in a dungeon, right? Where you're shepherding resources. Everyone's kind of in that fight or flight the whole time because anything could happen, right? It could collapse around you. Something could just spring out of the wall like a swarm of centipedes, or there's all kinds of things that can occur to, to test your skills and your resources. And so we go from that broad conceptual narrative into a play-by-play. Whether it's on a grid or even if we're just all using our mind's eye in order to envision what's occurring in that dungeon. And there are 2 bits of wisdom that I love passing along here. I mean, just like anything else, I didn't write these, and so the wisdom was brought to my attention, and I very much enjoy them, and I've enjoyed adopting them, especially with our considerations and our exercises here. The first is the concept of a 5-room dungeon. The idea was so good, Wizards of the Coast stole it for the example adventure Kobold Hall in one of their works. This can change. This is not a solid, every dungeon you encounter has only 5 rooms. The 5 rooms can be literal or metaphorical. But these are 5 solid concepts to presenting a dungeon. And you know what? If you only want a brief one, if you want a one-shot dungeon that doesn't turn into a 6-hour one-shot, or, two several-hour one-shots over the course of a month, because you want to run a big, like a mega, not even a mega dungeon. Sometimes just smaller dungeons can take a while, because everyone is in that mode to examine, to move cautiously. Combat can take a while. What is honestly less than a minute in game time can take several hours for the DM and the players to go through the combat and the motions. And remember, we're using resources, and maybe you don't want to use those resources, so you have to be very careful. Oh, okay, Rhodey. Yeah, and hey, Rhodey, I'm glad that you're getting some help in our workshop about the ideas that you're having as you're finding inspiration to continue writing your stories. All right, so first up, we have an entrance with a guardian. There has to be a reason why nobody else has come here before. It's difficult to get to, it's hidden, there's a guard posted outside, or a foreign big nasty decided the entrance makes a good lair, something only heroic types could overcome. An antagonist right away gets the player's excitement up and gets the dice rolling. Sometimes you can switch the first and second room if having a puzzle at the entrance makes more sense. So the entrance is trapped, there's multiple entrances, but only one is correct. Tomb of Horrors is listed as an example. The entrance requires a special key or ceremony. Speak friend and enter. A guardian was deliberately placed at the entrance. A golem, guard dog, a nightclub bouncer. You know, we're talking about a casino. Well, this is similar. Running, if you're running Vampire, a nightclub scene could be effectively a dungeon, right? It's a contained space. There are goals and NPCs and enemies, maybe even monsters, and other challenges to overcome. A hidden ambush awaits in the shadows. Or a portcullis that the kobold guards can pass through easily, but the heroes must expose themselves to lift. A puzzle or role-playing challenge. For those whose characters aren't the fighting types, the next area lets them show off the skill points they spent in diplomacy and spot checks. I mean, that might be dated for 5th edition, but whatever. This pleases the players who didn't pick Rangers and Barbarians and breaks up the pace a bit before getting back to the RAR. Be sure to allow for multiple solutions because playing the Guess What I'm Thinking game is boring for players. Once you figure out the puzzle here, go back to room 1 and put in some clues. That is solid advice. You know, as someone who has used riddles and physical puzzles, to success and also to the extreme frustration of the players. And look, it wasn't my intention, and it happens because people know what they know. They can reason what they reason. Or if you hold a strict interpretation of an answer to a riddle, even if there are clues, it might cause friction. So just be careful, and as a DM, if you know your players, use that meta knowledge when you're going to make that presentation. Ivlon, why are you saying owie? One moment here. Sorry, I think that's like the last vestiges of my cold here. Hasn't been too bad lately, but I've still been suffering a little bit. Oh no, Ivlon. Well, hopefully it will pass without trace. Oh, I missed the mute on that. Sorry. Or it could be easily addressed by a doctor because big oof. So a chessboard floor with special squares, a hallway of colored portals with an old riddle telling them which way to go. A corrupt city official can give the permits to enter the radiation sector. Right? So it doesn't even have to be someone directly outside the dungeon. In this case, you have to go through red tape, and the office is actually across town. Oh, diadems. Is it something that like a medication or just sort of like an ultrasound session can't break them up? Or you'll have to forgive me because I'm not familiar with that particular malady. The apartment building has buzzers for tenants, but the quarry is using an assumed name as a role-playing challenge or a puzzle. Oh, I'm sorry. So the thing across town was I mentioned the Guardian, which it could be either, or you just have to figure out you have to go talk to the Guardian in order to get in, but you got to go across town. The chamber of the Ark is covered in venomous snakes that will shy away from open fire. What's that from, right? Pardon me. Or the floor is covered in pressure plates for dart traps that kobolds are light enough to ignore. A trick or a setback. This is where you raise the stakes. Something about the plan has gone wrong. Something the opposite of what they expected. Maybe the NPC they brought along gets kidnapped. Maybe they fight the big bad, but it's actually a minion pretending. This room is good for giving your players a second dose of fighting or puzzle, whichever they prefer. This is also a good opportunity to get players to waste some resources that could be useful in the big fight in room 4, such as using up their flaming oil on a troll when a mummy is the BBEG, big bad evil guy. The hostages they rescued demand or plead to be taken back immediately before the heroes can find the villain. You found the Lich's lair, but he seems awfully weak. And isn't he a demi-lich? Contains a one-way exit, dumping all or some of the group back outside of room 1. And you gotta go through again, possibly even re-triggering traps. The heroes found the data they need to steal, but it's encrypted, and the password is further inside. One of the NPCs that came along takes the magic dingus for himself and runs off. There's a complication. You know, throw me the whip, throw me the idol. The heroes walk right into the kobolds playing a sport with swinging boulders from high ledges. That's a complication. Azrael, yes, government bureaucracy is a dungeon of another sort. Yes, yes, yes. And now we have, here's the big, the climax of the dungeon. Right, room 4. Now, again, does this have to be literally room 4? Have we only gone through 4 rooms? Maybe. Probably not. You can have interconnecting areas that are offering different clues or flavor. Or if you want to bleed off some more resources from your PCs, you can have other little combats. But, you know, if you do, you know, this is then what you have here are going to be the bigger combats. Not a little skirmish or, I don't know, some bugs falling on someone for, you know, some swarm damage. But, you know, it's damage, but it's just sort of keeping everyone frosty. You know, or making them use their hit die or something if they even can rest. Some dungeons may not allow for a rest because it's too strenuous, right? There's too much pressure going on. Here's the ringleader, the goblin chieftain, the big kahuna. Big O, it's showtime. Spend more of your effort on tactics, set pieces, and showy effects on the fight in this room, because this is what the adventure module is named after. Make a detailed map with interesting terrain and usable props for jumping or tripping over, grabbing or swinging. Start or end with some acting. Maybe the boss needs to stall to finish preparing, or to allow for reinforcements. Maybe there's hapless minions to toy with while their leader falls, or when their leader falls. The big bad is going to have powers that is beyond the monsters and traps encountered up until now. Right? Everything was sort of like hinting or training, kind of not tutorial, but the clues were there the whole time. The lair is trapped and only the BBEG knows how to get around the room safely. Previous rooms might have clues for the weaknesses of the main villain. And I'll show you where that is considered even in the DMG. The evil guy has the holy what's-it in his grasp and threatens to destroy it. The kobold chief has a magic staff, a pet that steals players' gear, and a rolling boulder trap that his followers can avoid by climbing ledges and using ranged attacks. And finally, our room 5 is reward and revelation. Here's where you sucker punch the players. The big fight is over. Time to pat each other on the back for another great job. Or is it? It doesn't have to be an actual 5th room. It could be a plot twist that reveals itself after the big fight in room 4. Maybe the players will find the plot hook to the next adventure, or clues about a major plot arc over the campaign. Or maybe the real villain will reveal himself and twirl his mustache. A trap is sprung, which reanimates the big guy from room 4. Bonus treasure is uncovered, which leads elsewhere, such as part of a treasure map, or the deed to some land. After being weakened by the fight in room 4, the bad guy uncloaks from following the heroes and snatches the what's-it. The captured princess wasn't kidnapped, but ran away from home to elope with the bad guy. What a twist, huh? You go out to save the princess, and she actually doesn't want to be saved. In fact, she's probably sore at you for beating up her fiancé. The true gruesome meaning behind a national holiday is discovered. The aliens' language is deciphered, revealing that the hostilities were all just a misunderstanding. A prophecy comes true, but not the way the players expected. Or the kobold chief was pressured into raiding the human villages by a young white dragon who demanded tribute. So going through dungeon consideration, does your dungeon have these 5 elements? Some way, shape, or form? Are they contained somewhere inside your dungeon? And if you want an interesting benchmark, think of, there's a lot of video games that this could apply to as well. You know, if any of you have seen, if played or watched played, Alien Isolation, that's a big old dungeon crawl. That's exactly what that game is from start to finish. Do these elements show up in that dungeon crawl? Sci-fi doesn't mean it's not a dungeon crawl. Azrael, yes. Klaatu Barada. And a little bit more expansive. And this is more for filling in some details of your dungeon, right? Do you have these 7 points scattered somewhere among the 5 rooms of your dungeon? You know, or at least the 5 big rooms of your dungeon. Does your dungeon somewhere, whether it's at the beginning, middle, or end, does it have something to steal? Now, do your players have to steal from the dungeon? No. But there could be things for them to take. And remember, treasure doesn't need to be treasure. It could be shiny stuff such as boring old coins, or or the jeweled brassiere of a zombie queen. Knowledge such as where to find more treasure, or information you can use to blackmail the king, or even a sage who can answer a single question honestly. Friendship such as an amorous purple worm that follows you around and protects you when it's hungry and a little bored. Trade goods like a wagon full of tea. Territory like a tower the players can claim as their own, or an apartment in a nice part of the city. And useful adventuring stuff like a magic sword, scroll of blot out the sun, or a parachute. So is there something hanging around, right? Something that they can acquire. And do remember, treasure tells a story. Why was something like this found here? Why was it brought here? What use did it serve the inhabitants of this place? In the past or even in the present? Pneumonica says, I once had a fantasy city attacked by a giant monster with chaos and panic in the streets. The PCs were not leveled enough for it. The entire city became a dungeon as they maneuvered to stay out of the way of the thing while trying to strike at it, and for some of them, loot bodies and raid closets, etc. And Coffee's asking for treasure, please. Hey, you have a job offer, my friend. That said, nothing is stopping you all from seeking employment, whether it's above board or not. You know, nothing has necessarily stopped you from taking a break to raise some money, steal money, or do whatever the party wants to do. So there is money available. It's out there, Coffee Cat, but y'all are going to have to pursue it. Hey, GM Volt, welcome. Rhodey, so when we're talking about the 5 rooms, they don't have to be back to back. You can have other rooms, other battles, other puzzles or pieces of evidence, art pieces that are describing the history of this place, or something along those lines. Hey, Gidlock, it's been a while. Great to see you. And GM Vault has posted some updated pics on the Underdark terrain that you've been creating. Ooh, look at that. Did you use a hot wire, like a hot wire cutter for this? Proxon. Okay. Ah, my friend, is this, do you have the collection of Magic the Gathering novels? If so, good stuff. So clearly, GM Vault. Oh, they're Pathfinder. Okay. So clearly, you're gonna put some, mushroom base as like filler, and you're gonna grow natural mushrooms in your terrain. Am I correct? All right. Something to be killed. You have something to be killed in your dungeon. This is pretty obvious. Of course, there's threatening things in the dungeon. There has to be some challenge, otherwise it isn't a dungeon. For the most part, you could run on pure suspense with nothing in there, but your PCs might get suspicious after a little while that nothing's tried to kill them. The simplest way to do that is with things that are trying to kill you. Yes, you can have monsterless dungeons based on traps. Those are cool, but that's why this checklist is written in pencil, not in stone, says the digital website. There are many ways to make combat with even basic monsters more interesting. Also, remember that dungeons tell their story through nouns. The history of a dungeon is usually relayed through monster choices. Why use orcs when you can use degenerate cannibal versions of the original dwarven inhabitants? And descriptions of those creatures: a barnacle-covered zombie, an iron golem charred by dragon fire, the elven armor scraps that the goblins were wearing, the elven wand rifle that one of the goblins has for some reason. I'm glad you feel better, Rhodey. Purple moss and similar colored sea glass to add to this. I'm enjoying your work in progress pictures, GM Vault. Something to kill you. Dungeons are designed to be beaten. That's why we don't fill them with inescapable obstacles. Rocks fall, everyone dies. Or impenetrable barriers. Sorry, the whole dungeon is wrapped in adamantine dome. You can't get in. It's throwing out. So the wand rifle is. Why not, right? In fact, you heard wand rifle and it caught your all's interest. What is a wand rifle? Why do the goblins have it, and why did the elves make it? How? What does it do? Yeah, I said wand rifle. But dungeons need to feel like they were designed to be unbeatable. It's important to feel like this isn't just a bowling alley where the DM sets up the pins for the players to knock down. You need to have deadly elements in your deadly dungeon for it to feel deadly. Just follow these two important rules. Try to follow at least one. Label your deadly stuff as such: a sleeping dragon, a door barricaded from the player's side with a sign warning of deadly spiders. These things look deadly from a distance. A chance to escape. Maybe the dragon can't fit into the smaller tunnels around his lair. Maybe the manticore is chained to a rock. Both of these serve the same function. They allow the players to pick their own battles, something you can't do on a linear railroad game. I think that's why a lot of OSR, or old school Renaissance, OSR folk hate the idea of boss battles because they're the one battle in the dungeon that is required. Horrible monsters that are avoidable give the players agency and allow them to be architects of their own demise. Side note, I think that nearly all combat should be escapable, sometimes with a cost: dropped food, gold, maybe a dead PC or hireling. In my experience, PCs will get themselves killed often enough even if the enemies never left the rooms they were in. Also, putting quote-unquote unbeatable monsters in your dungeon also allows the dungeon to be self-scaling. The level 1 party will just tiptoe past the dragon, while the level 6 party might consider fighting it, so they steal the treasure it is sleeping on top of. And just like that, a dungeon becomes appropriate for both level 1 parties and level 6 parties. And this is another reason why I think OSR games have a wide range. Again, kind of harkening back to old school style role-playing. This is a big one. Different paths. Different paths allow different parties to experience the dungeon in different ways. It's a randomizer, similar to what you'd get if you ordered the dungeon rooms according to a random number generator, and it keeps you, the DM, from getting bored. Player agency. Players can choose the path they're better suited for. The party with 2 clerics can take the zombie-infested tunnel, and the party with air support can get themselves dropped into the courtyard. It also allows dungeons to be a little bit self-adjusting too. Players who are more confident can challenge the front door, while lower-level parties will creep around the outside. This can allow parties to walk away from rooms they don't like, if you want to follow that philosophy. Now, if you want to design sort of an on-rails dungeon shooter, where, you know, it is more linear. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm not using linear as a bad word. You can do so. Everything just kind of naturally goes one to the next. Oh, pardon me. Hey, Raven Star, it's been a while. I hope you've been well. You've been happy and healthy. And we have a Roger Twy here. A tribe of goblins with a deck of many things. Oof. They'll just keep making more goblins until they finally pull something cool. So Raven and Roger have joined us. Thank you very much. You've been so-so. Well, thank you. Even if you're feeling so-so, Raven, for taking the time to join us here and be a part of our conversation and hang out with all us nerds. It's really nice of you. Well, you know, you have a community here that you can talk to. You can share your photographs if you wish. You can get it. You can engage with however you'd like to do so. So it does warn also, don't put in too many. It could ruin the experience. Ultimately, it's up to you. This is merely a set of guidelines. This is a suggestion. Now, in your dungeon, do you have someone to talk to? People forget this one, and yet it's one of the strongest. It's the one I feel the strongest about. Strong enough for caps lock. Every dungeon needs someone to talk to. It's a role-playing game. NPCs are the cheapest and easiest way to add depth to your dungeon. It's easy because everyone knows how to roleplay a generic goblin prisoner and has a pretty good idea of what information or services that goblin prisoner can provide. And it's got depth because there are so many ways that a party can use a goblin prisoner. There's almost no bloat. You don't need to invent new mechanics, and it takes almost no space to write, quote, there is a goblin in a cage. His name is Zerglum, and he has been imprisoned by his fellows for setting rats free. The problem is that a lot of dungeons are treasure vaults, tombs, and abandoned mines. The only creatures you can usually encounter in those places are undead, golems, oozes, and vermin with ambiguous food chains. None of those are really known for being chatty, so here are some options. A pit trap detector? Yeah, Roger knows how you can use a goblin prisoner. A rival adventuring party. Goblins never need explanations. Spell effect, like a chatty magic mouth spell. A graveyard nymph. Ghosts. Make a sympathetic one. Everyone expects them to be jerks. A ghoul head sitting on a shelf. It can talk if you blow through its neck hole. An old man trapped in a painting communicates by painting. Demon trapped in a mirror. Communicates by repeating your own phrases back to you. An ancient war machine trapped by a stasis field bomb seeks enemies who died thousands of years ago, will self-destruct when it learns that it lost the war. Consider giving your players speak with stones or speak with lock spells. Dungeons usually have those. And that being said, too, if you have, druids or rangers or others who can cast those spells, work within the boundaries of the spell, but, encourage your players if they have speak with plants. That, some kind of plant lives here, right? Mushrooms, molds. Speak with animals, even if they're vermin. They might be able to offer something. Rhodium says that's gross, and GM Vault says that's awesome. Hey, look, it's a severed head. It's undead. It can still flap its its mouth and its tongue and use its lips. But where's it going to get the air? So if you want this ghoul to talk, you have to you got to blow through its throat, and it'll talk because you're providing the air. A Forgotten War Machine reminds me of several Bolos stories. What's a Bolo story? Gotta play this skull like a bagpipe, says Roger Twy. Aside from something that will probably kick the party's ass, I think this might be the most OSR-ish. These are the unexplainable, the weird, and the unknown. And I don't mean unknown like an unidentified potion is unknown. I mean something that introduces a new wrinkle into the game. A room with two doors of different sizes. Anything that is put into the small door emerges from the large door at twice the size and vice versa. Anything that goes through the doors twice in the same direction, double enlarged or double shrunk, has terrible consequences. A pedestal. If anything is placed on top of it, it turns into its opposite. Okay, the opposite of a sword is an axe, but what is the opposite of a banana? A metal skeleton. If a skull is placed atop it, a Speak with Dead spell is cast on it. Now, so you would just describe that there's this like an anatomical like skeleton, but it has no head, and it's hanging on a rack in the corner. Would your players then take the initiative to want to experiment with it? Or steal it because it's made of a precious metal? Who knows? You're fulfilling a couple conditions, though. Pneumonica says the opposite of a banana is a coconut. GM Vault. I like that. Ooh, pardon me. Bolo are AI-controlled super tanks made to fight an alien menace that was destroying the human race. Original stories by Keith Laumer. Wishing wells that are portals to other small ponds in the dungeon. Where the portal goes is determined by what you throw in the well before you jump in. Copper coins, silver coins, gold coins, gems, and arrows all lead to different places. Two doorways. Impassable when you walk through a single one, but if two people walk through them simultaneously, they are fused together and transported to a city of similarly fused people. A machine that turns finished products into raw goods and raw goods into ammunition. A sundial that controls the sun. Wouldn't that be fun? A boat golem that flees from loud noises. You can direct it by standing at the back of it and shouting. Or two holes in the wall. If two limbs are put in the holes, they're swapped. If only one limb is put in the hole, it is severed. Can be used to graft new limbs onto amputees. Alright, so you just described the room. Room has holes in the wall. Looks like your arm might be able to fit inside if you really wanted to. Do you want to? What do you want to do with it? And you don't always have to just focus either. Because sometimes including it in a broad description, let your players show you what they're interested in. Overlap with magic items. There's a lot of other notes here that are relevant, but that's a good prompt to consider. Right? Something to experiment with. An oddity. It's a workbench that will go on to reveal a clue because you applied the particular acid to the paper to reveal the password or the like. Raven says, would an empty canteen turn into a full one? That's up to you as a DM. If you know... Oh, big stretch. If you know... Because you're the one building the dungeon. If you know how this works and what you would consider to be opposites, or you would consider to be an interesting and appropriate effect, I mean, make notes for yourself. Don't let your players see. But make notes for yourself, and if having some kind of a insta-gib, right, an insta-kill spell is if it's appropriate, you can put it in there. Put warnings if you wish. You know, just be careful as a DM. If you know what's going on, you know what's going on, and you can advertise it as much or little as you'd like. All right, and then lastly, this is the last general piece of advice to consider for your dungeon. Something the players probably won't find. This one might be contentious. Why put stuff in your dungeon that your players won't find? First, you don't have to put much in the dungeon, just a few words here or there to reward the players who are more than thorough. Inside the purple worm's stomach is a bag of holding, full of 1,000 gallons of purple worm stomach acid. Or, quote, the pirate captain has a gold bar hidden in his peg leg, wrapped in felt so that it won't rattle. It's not like you're going to be designing multiple cool rooms that no one will ever get to. So, you know, enjoy. I think it's important to hide things because there's a sincere joy in exploration and testing the limits. If all the things in a dungeon are obvious, why even bother wondering what is at the bottom of the well? Is there anything interesting buried beneath all this mud? Players who don't have the time or resources to explore a dungeon 100%, and they shouldn't, will always walk away with a feeling of enormity, and that there was always more to find. And then a couple other suggestions. I like to reward people who are good at the game, being good at finding things. It should be a spectrum. Some things, or most things, should be out in the open. Some stuff should be hidden behind curtains. And some stuff should be tucked deeply away in the dungeon's folds. So yeah, the next time you decorate a room with a mural of a defeated king presenting tribute to his conqueror, be sure to put an actual treasure chest in the wall behind the painting of the treasure chest. I've run that dungeon 3 times, and no one has ever found it. I guess, or I get a little scary every time or a little excited every time I describe it to players. Oh, we have a fluffy sheep. Some player, yeah, that's true. Some groups or even players might not be able to find their nose even if they sneezed. So, you know, if you throw in this, like, so this, don't make the MacGuffin the super secret hidden thing. But if they do find your super secret hidden thing, make it, you know, make it good, make it decent, something they can use. You know, something that... something that's going to bring flavor, right? A very good example of this would be an item they find in a dungeon early on. And if they do find it, you know, it doesn't even have to be that difficult, but it might be out of the way. You know, it might have taken you know, finding a secret passage or casting detect magic or something. But it's an item that, you know, they find, you know, whatever, early on, halfway into the campaign, that ends up, without being obvious, it's not an obvious MacGuffin, but ends up being really good in the final conflict of the campaign. And I'm going to provide the links to you here if you want to check out these resources yourself. The salt shaker of 11 herbs and spices. Hey, you know what? That brings flavor to your campaign. It may not defeat the big bad evil guy, but your players will enjoy it and talk about this interesting item that they acquired at the end of the day and for other days, weeks, months, or years to come. So that's the basis of this checklist that I want to go over with you. And we've pre-generated we have pre-generated some content already. And so I'm going to get up and let's take about a 10-minute break. I'm going to refresh my drink and get a snack, get up and do a little bit of stretching. And then for our next part, I want to start filling in concepts, right? I'm not going to write out the entire script of a dungeon, and I'm not going to go through and do the micromanaging of, well, you know, I want to make sure that we have 10 encounters, so I have to split it between that's minutia that can be done relatively easily at another point in time, but you can't have the minutia unless we have that solid concept. And so when we come back, you know, we've primed our minds, we've had a discussion, you know, we're thinking about what could we put in a dungeon. I want to go over the prompts that you can find in the DMG for a dungeon, and then we can make a dungeon in concept by filling in, you know, what are the rooms? What would qualify as room 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5? And then where amongst those rooms or between them are we going to find these elements of the dungeon dungeon checklist? Hey, no problem, Azrael. I'm going to get up and do a little evening constitutional myself. Fluffy Sheep says the 5-room dungeon is like a 5-paragraph essay. You don't have to stick to the format strictly. Correct. The 1-page dungeon challenge. Yep, Elbrin. So yeah, we're going to come back. We're going to tap those resources, dip into the DMG a little bit, and we are going to propose a dungeon that we can run with the characters that we've generated, the villains that we've generated, because one of those in particular was meant to be sort of the boss of the dungeon, or at least will lead them to the dungeon if he's not, you know, encountered and slain or captured in that dungeon, but is going to be very much tied to it. And, I mean, depending on the energy, the time, or the interest, I have MS Paint open. We can even do a very kind of a basic sketch through of how this dungeon could be presented, and go over the resources of where you can find information on traps and the like. So hang in there. We're gonna come back in about 10 minutes, and we're gonna design a dungeon together. Now that we're primed, we have our minds working, and we're ready to go.